In this particular conversation, we're going to discuss states and build upon the last handful of videos where we discuss states. Upon reflection, we realize that when we are in our ideal state of mind, or a deliberately chosen state of mind, we automatically find ourselves accurately interpreting the five sensory experience and see it in harmony and in contribution to our vision. And as a result, we realize that the five sensory experience, or the outer world, is both revealing and inspiring at the same time. Revealing about what's within the subconscious mind or the self-image, and inspiring us in very creative ways, bringing forth insights and perspectives within to transmute the outer world, what appears to be on the surface, as obstacle into opportunity. In the last conversation, we left off by saying, if in doubt, do the loving thing. Now the quote was actually, when in doubt, do the loving thing. But I'm going to change that to, if in doubt. By changing the word from when to if, we imply that it could potentially show up. But we want to reduce that likelihood. So this interesting wordsmithing of inner dialogue, inner conversation, is going to be reflected in our experiences. So by saying that doubt might not show up, we increase the probability and the possibility of it not showing up on the journey to bringing forth results. By changing certain words around, we find that the outer world, as we already know through many of these discussions, reflect those assumptions within. Now let's go deeper into this. If in doubt, do the loving thing. Now there's things that we can do here in the outer world, five sensory experience. You could take an action or do something that is the loving thing. That action is still generated from within, as in it's the mind that has formulated that particular action needs to be brought forth. Now we have things like reaction, which is stimulated by the outer world. And one of the things we want to do is align those reactions into more so of a deliberate action or an intuitive response. And the outcome of that being knowing what to say, when to say, how to say, doing the right thing at the right time, at the right place, and being one with the five sensory experience, inspired from the world within, thus experiencing what we call the ideal state of mind. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about bringing ourselves into the ideal state of mind, which, by the way, is experienced and externalized as the five sensory interpretation in this eternal now. All things exist now, and all things that exist now are experienced based on the state of mind. To stimulate this conversation further, here's a quote from Neville Goddard. He says, when you know what you want, construct a scene which would imply that you have it. Enter the scene by touching the articles there, listening to the sounds that may be heard, seeing with your spiritual eye, and smelling its odor with your spiritual nose. Now we have the power to do this in our imagination. We can imagine ourselves experiencing what we desire by working with the five senses in our imagination. And as we continue to do this, we'll realize that one of the key attributes, key reasons why we do this, is it brings us into a certain state of mind. Now, this state of mind is what we call the ideal state of mind. Because what is he saying here? He's saying, so when you know what you want, construct a scene that would imply that you have it. So since it is your desire to have that experience, when you construct a scene in your imagination that would imply that you would have it, as in have the five sensory experience in your imagination, it will automatically bring you into the ideal state of mind. You will then realize that you are on the journey to the fulfillment of that particular imaginary experience. So let's look at this for a moment. Action, which is happening in the mind, has a result, which is the effect, which is the state of mind. And from that effect of state of mind flows other effects, such as five sensory interpretation via inner conversation, as well as sensory integration to the five sensory experience. When you're at a certain state of mind, you interpret the five sensory experience as in what we refer to as the physical senses, which is distinct from what he refers to as the spiritual senses, as in harmony. If we're in a different state of mind, let's say a disempowering state of mind, or an angry state of mind, or frustrated state of mind, the emotions are going to reflect that state of mind. And it's accurate. Cause within and result as in emotional integration and physical behavior, as well as psychological interpretation of the five sensory experience. Even more reason why we want to maintain this ideal state of mind. So, in relation to what Neville is referring to, before we get into what I want to discuss, which is the NLP Submodalities, we want to ask ourselves, what is the cause within that is allowing us to feel the way we want to feel? So a simple question we want to ask ourselves on a regular basis each day to maintain this ideal state of mind: what causes you to feel this way? Ask yourself the question. Now we might interpret and say, the cause is in the outer world. But we have to pause for a moment and reflect and say, we're looking to get ourselves in the ideal state of mind. And that is happening within. So perhaps it's good to reinterpret this idea that the cause is in the outer world and say, we are the ones assigning the meaning within. That is what we are implying, this meaning within. Now we're going to get deeper into these discussions over the weeks to come into beliefs and things like that related to this word imply. But for now, we're focusing on states. So what would imply that we would experience in our imagination this certain sensation, five sensory experience, that would result in certain effect, which would be state of mind, that would bring forth the ideal behaviors, five sensory emotional integration, as well as interpretation? It could be things like seeing yourself already successful and other people congratulating you, or realizing that you had benefited the lives of others, and thus that is what is a causative factor of bringing you into the ideal state. If we look at a disempowering experience in the outer world, and we don't have to do it real time in that moment, but reflect at the end of the day, that's why cause and effect reflection is so important. We can say, what was the meaning I was assigning to that five sensory experience? Derive to this conclusion yourself. That perhaps it's related to what we would refer to as the concept of self, the self-image. Now, as we had stated in the last few videos, that if we meditate, or more accurately put, remain in the ideal state of mind, it becomes our self-image, in which we don't have to monitor and get ourselves in the ideal state of mind, although I still recommend ensuring that as you go about your day-to-day, that you practice mindfulness and awareness to any kind of interpretation of the five sensory experience that appears to change your state of mind. And from there, reflect and say, what was the causative belief, assumption, interpretation from within? And there are two ways that you can go about doing this. Number one is you can understand where it came from. It could be part of your subconscious past, self-image, or certain things that are buried within the subconscious or the unconscious. Or you could bring yourself into the ideal state of mind, knowing that by bringing yourself in the ideal state of mind, it will affirm the ideal state of mind, and that will become the self-image, and change will happen instantaneously in that moment, and over a period of time, it will become your self-image. And I recommend doing both, because I'm certainly a huge fan of going into my subconscious world. It's a subconscious realm. It's within you. There's a world within, as Charles Haanel puts it in the Master Key System. And you have the ability to travel into this world within and learn about yourself. And within this world, upon understanding yourself, you recognize the power is actually within, number one, and that world within is the infinite world. And this five sensory experience is a reflection of that infinite world. There's a lot of power in that, understanding that particular principle. So again, if you get into your ideal state of mind, you release from mental chatter. Thus, we release from overthinking. And it reduces the reactivity to whatever five sensory experience you're having on the journey to fulfilling your desired outcome. And also remember that your ideal state of mind, as we've been discussing over the last handful of videos, externalizes as the state of those around you. People, environment, circumstance, and information can and only can be interpreted by you. Who's interpreting this five sensory experience? Only you. Even if you have a conversation with somebody about the five sensory experience, you still are the one interpreting it. Although much of it may be subconscious or unconscious. That's why I recommend the subconscious work, to really go into your world within and understand where these interpretations come from. So in NLP, we have something called submodalities. And we're going to borrow these concepts from NLP, the submodalities, and integrate them into achieving the ideal state of mind. Now, this is something that I've worked with for many years, and it has produced tremendous results as far as my ability to produce results, number one, and number two, maintain the ideal state of mind, which is a facilitator for producing the results. So let's combine this from what we learned from Neville. The 5 NLP submodalities refer to the 5 senses. So we got visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. Visual is what we can see in our mind's eye, the spiritual eye. Auditory is the inner dialogue. Kinesthetic is how we feel, as in the touch, the sensations on the body. Olfactory is what we smell. Gustatory is what we taste. Now, here's the power towards one of these, or a combination of them, that we want to work with that will bring us into the ideal state. For example, I identify a lot with auditory. So for me, self-talk, affirmations, inner conversations bring me into the ideal state. I'm able to talk myself into state. As well as, I brought up a few videos ago that one of the things that I do before I do live events is I talk to 5 people. So conversations in general bring me into state. Now this is very important for me because, as we have implied, that maintaining the ideal state of mind is what will create a harmonious journey, experience, 5 sensory integration towards a destination. So what you want to do is you want to identify what it is for you, and it may not be auditory. Some individuals are visual. Specifically, if we're working with visual, see themselves accomplishing a goal or see themselves getting recognition. Understanding that we tend to categorize motivation in 3 categories: power, affiliation, and achievement. Power over ourselves, as in we want to feel the power, like we have the power. And when we know and when we hear something or experience something that says that we have the power, we get into state. The second would be achievement. You will experience a visualization that brings you into state when you see it as achievement. In other words, you see yourself accomplishing a goal, and there might not be anyone around to see it, but that's what brings you into state, seeing yourself accomplishing something. The next is affiliation. We see ourselves achieving a goal and other people having a conversation about that particular goal and sharing in that experience so they can benefit. Because then it would imply that you're also motivated by that. And what you're motivated by can also bring you into state. Now, it's not to say that this is linear. That's the power of this. This is an ongoing process to figure this out for ourselves. But when you do, it's going to be enormously powerful. To have the ability to talk myself into state, or visualize yourself into state, or imagine in your mind's eye kinesthetically the sensation, or olfactory, or gustatory, or a combination of all of it in your imaginal scene, and find yourself in state, is going to help you in situations where you felt reactive. So this takes practice, identifying what it is for you. Now, this is not only to be worked with in the imagination, also consider the environment. So I like working with self-talk because I'm very auditory. Imagination, because I am pretty visual. I like to visualize, but usually when I visualize, it involves a conversation. So if I'm constructing a scene that would imply that I already have what I desire, usually it's seeing myself having a conversation with somebody about how I have already achieved that particular experience. So in my imagination, I'm integrating both visual, as in the conversation with them, as well as auditory. I also tend to work with audios and videos, mostly audio. So if I watch a YouTube video, I rarely look at the screen unless there is like some visuals that go along with the presentation. I actually prefer more auditory-based consumption of information, like audiobooks, or when I put on YouTube videos, I listen to them. Now, many who enjoy my videos tend to also be very auditory, hence why we very much resonate with the idea of self-talk, audio affirmations, because here's the thing. When I do these videos, I'm not on the screen, and you don't see me, but you see the mind map. And the mind map helps guide the conversation, but there isn't a lot of visual stimulus. Most of this is auditory. Now, as I'm having this conversation with you, it's important to reflect and say, what is it for me? Am I visual? Am I auditory? Am I kinesthetic? Am I olfactory, gustatory? Am I motivated by power, achievement, and affiliation, or a combination? This will help you construct a causative factor, be it you listen to an audio affirmation, or you hear yourself have an inner conversation, or you look at a vision board that you've placed on your wall, or you imagine certain things in your mind's eye that would imply, and then find yourself into state. And we also have environment, outer world. For me, I also find myself very stimulated into the ideal state by my environment. So thus, I consciously choose my workspace and set it up in a way that I feel the certain state of mind. That's important to reflect upon. I also choose to be around certain environments when I'm doing things at the end of the day, or where I'm living and where I'm working, to stimulate myself into an ideal state of mind. Now, while I have been, as we have been discussing, assigning the meaning from within to these particular environments, because that's really what's happening here, because the meaning is already there and it works, I don't want to change all the meaning. For me, I'm more interested in changing the meaning of what shows up in my day-to-day entrepreneurial activities, my conversations that I have with others from the perspective of sales, marketing, public speaking, or any kind of communication that facilitates a mutual benefit. That's where my mind is in optimization in those areas. And that's facilitated automatically by my environments. Because if my environments are in check, and I set up my environments to be ideal, then what's going to happen is I don't have to think about it. I'll find myself not reactive at all. It used to be less reactive back in the days. And now my environments produce no reactivity, because I would call them the ideal environment. Now, when we're talking about videos and audios here, we're talking about information that we consume. This is an important distinction. Some information that you consume will bring you into your ideal state of mind or other states of mind that you call desired states of mind. Other information you consume will seem to disempower you, bring you into a disempowered external locus of control based orientation, which is associated to those videos and audios that you are consuming. The interpretation still is from within. However, what we want to do is make our journey as smooth to the destination as possible and as affirmative to our definite chief aim or that which we desire to experience as possible. And so it's important then to choose music, information, or any kind of audio or video, especially if you're very auditory. For example, if I'm listening to something and the information is presented a certain way from a place where I feel disempowering, I will start to notice myself falling out of my ideal state of mind. Again, the interpretation is from within, but recognizing that that is what's happening, I have the power to change it. And I could either change how I interpret that information, or I could switch that information source, or I could switch that audio or video information to something else. You have the power to decide within. And the reason why we're being present about these particular elements is because the recognition, again, goes back to the beginning. By accessing our ideal state of mind, we find ourselves back in the now, the eternal now, as Eckhart Tolle talks about in Power of Now. And as a result of that, we feel more empowered, motivated, inspired, and we know that we are on the journey, which is one of harmony to that what we desire to experience. So these NLP submodalities can be worked with via imagination by imagining ourselves in certain experiences. For example, one of the things that I like to do before I do any consulting is imagine myself already seeing an ideal outcome in which the client says or communicates in a way that would imply that they received a beneficial consulting session. So it would be things like I see them smiling and I hear them saying to me in my imagination, "This is exactly what I was looking for. You really helped me. You're very good at what you do. It seems to me that you're continuously getting better at what you do." All of this brings me into a certain state of mind. Now, all I do is maintain that state of mind, and it's easy, by the way, when it's supported by ideal environments. And what I found is that it's easy if you do to the best of your ability each day to ensure that your inner conversations. By the way, what is this? Well, this goes back to what Neville speaks of, called the law of assumption. We're assuming from within. We're giving everything meaning from within. Cause, within. Effect, outer world. And meaning, the facilitator, the assumptions, within. Some of these assumptions are already there in our subconscious self-image that we could work with. Be it our personality, be it our current self-image, we can understand those elements and work with them in a supporting way. And others, we may decide to change them. As in, you can change the meaning. You have the power to change the meaning. Because at the end of the day, you are assigning the meaning. And some of this meaning is inspired from within, from the subconscious realm. Or some of this meaning may be interpreted based on five sensory suggestions, or maybe listening to others on how we should interpret information. Knowing that this is what has been happening, we've got to reflect and say, how do we work with this information in a harmonious way to bring forth our results? So let's simplify this. Causes within, we can practice by identifying what we respond to the most, be it visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory, and construct a scene in our imagination that would imply, for example, because I'm one that's really big on achievement, I can construct a scene before going to the gym. Let's say for whatever the reason I wasn't in the state of mind. And by the way, when you maintain your flow in the ideal state of mind, it happens automatically. So you don't have to do these things to bring yourself into the state of mind. It's automatic. But let's just say I wasn't in that ideal state of mind. And I recognize that for whatever the reason, I didn't want to go to the gym. Because I value achievement to such a high degree, I would imagine myself finishing the workout and saying to myself, you have a high degree of self-discipline. When you put your mind to something, you really achieve it. Therefore, this entire existence is easy for you because you have the ability to commit to something and see it all the way to completion. As soon as I see myself having a conversation with myself, perhaps on the car ride home from the gym, I immediately recognize why I'm doing this. And in relation to this conversation, I find myself in the state. This is the same thing to be said with olfactory. As mentioned a couple of videos ago, there are individuals that smell certain kinds of essential oils, and it brings them into a certain state of mind. So we have this all within us, and it's important to experiment. If you find yourself outside of the ideal state of mind, pause for a moment and say, what would imply that I already have the ideal outcome that I desire? And reflect upon if it could be visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, or gustatory. And ask yourself, what do I resonate with the most? And if you resonate with inner conversations or any kind of auditory-based stimuluses, engage in an inner conversation with yourself. And you could do it in the way that we talked about in the video where I was discerning between mental chatter and true inner voice. And by the way, that's very auditory based, as you can see how I'm interpreting reality. Invisible counsel, self-talk, conversations with 3 versions of yourself, all discussed in that particular video. I'll put a link in the description. And then you'll find yourself in the state. So again, going back to how we identify this is by simply asking ourselves the question, what causes you to feel that way? What's the cause? And if we say the cause is in the outer world, say, what is the meaning from within that I'm assigning that this cause is in the outer world? Find that meaning within and recognize that you can change the meaning. For example, if you say that certain information in the 5 sensory experience is distracting you, you can ask yourself, what is the source of this distraction or the meaning that I'm associating to this 5 sensory information? Perhaps the interpretation is that you need to get that information from that particular source, even though you know that every time you get information from that particular source, you find yourself disempowered. Well, what if you change the meaning to, I have the power within to find the information source that provides the accurate information that I need, as well as brings me into the ideal state of mind. Now, by creating that assumption, which is a form of affirmation, and affirming it to be true, you're changing the meaning around in your inner world. And as we change the meaning around in the inner world and affirm it to be true, or as Neville puts it, assume it to be done, what we'll notice is that we will actually find the information that we're looking for from another source that won't break your flow or change your state of mind. And I found this to be true on my journey and many that I spoke with about this. And what this allows them to do, which is the whole premise behind this whole conversation, is to maintain the ideal state of mind. So again, if we go back to the beginning, if in doubt, do the loving thing, the doubt in a level of disharmony between our inner and perhaps our inner and outer as well. And doing the loving thing would be going into your imagination or working with the NLP submodalities in our imagination to change our state of mind, which would be in relation and in harmony to the desired outcome, which is the loving thing, as well as we could do the behavioral loving thing, which will bring us into that ideal state of mind. So again, if it's visual, then you look at your vision board or whatever stimulus in the outer world that brings you back into the state of mind. If it's auditory, then you have a conversation with somebody that brings you into the ideal state of mind. If it's kinesthetic, then perhaps getting a nice hug from a loved one or a friend brings you into that ideal state of mind. If it's olfactory, then perhaps burning some candles that have some nice scent or certain kinds of scents that bring you into your ideal state of mind is important. If it's gustatory, then perhaps having a nice herbal tea brings you into a certain state of mind. And all of these things are important. Understand ourselves, and this is a journey. Okay, what do we respond to in our imagination as well as the outer world? And recognize we could be motivated by power, like we want to feel the power. That's one of our motivating factors. Also, we might be motivated by affiliation, as in we feel purposeful when we are relatable and connected with others. And by the way, we could be a combination of all these things. That's why it's important to go within our subconscious realm and understand our subconscious mind and find out what's important and accurate for us, which is in relation to our true identity. Or it could be something related to achievement, which means that you want to see yourself behaving a certain way. And by seeing yourself behaving that ideal way, it is what brings you into that ideal state of mind. Now, this will help us tremendously because all of these NLP submodalities are affirmations that bring us into the ideal state of mind. Although done by a different submodality or combination, still brings us into the ideal state of mind. If you want a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.